Obie stood a distance from the door of the princess's chamber, watching intently to see if she would leave from her mother's chambers or her own. Though he was almost certain of his doubts, a greater part of his heart prayed not to see her emerging from her chambers so his instincts could be proven wrong. After what seemed like an hour, but was likely only minutes, the door creaked open. The princess cautiously poked her head out first, checking if anyone was around before stepping out fully. Her movements were furtive, clearly an attempt to avoid being seen after the snake incident of the previous night. Fear clutched Obie's heart as he found it difficult to speak. He felt rooted to the spot with sorrow washing over him. He had prayed his instincts were wrong, but seeing her leaving her chamber sent daggers through his heart. He had begun to like the kind and beautiful princess, not knowing she was actually a snake. A wave of memories flashed across his brain of the time they spent together, filling his heart with pain. He had grown to like her, had made her company part of his morning routine, but never had he suspected this reality. Seeing the princess heading towards her mother's chamber, likely to confirm her mother's claim that she had spent the night there, Obie acted on instinct. He immediately stopped her with a smile on his face, struggling to mask his fears. "The queen is still asleep," he said, maintaining the smile as he approached, his heart beating like a drum. Ola looked at him with a frightened expression, scared of what he might say next. She thought, what was he doing here? Did he know? The fear was evident on her face. "Maybe we could talk for a while, if you don't mind," Obie requested, still trying to act brave. "Sure, we could take a walk." "I don't mind," Ola responded, though Obie could see how hesitant she was. He reassured her with a smile. As they walked outside the palace, with very few maidens and servants awake and working, Obie asked, "Do you remember the last time you approached the queen in the kitchen?" "Yes, I do," Ola nodded, her eyes not leaving his. She had never been so scared in her life as she watched Obie speak. "I didn't want any commotion this morning. That's why I insisted you come with me instead of going to her chambers," he explained. Ola's heart was beating non-stop as fear clenched her heart. She thought, if he came here early in the morning to wait for me, then it only means he didn't believe what my mother said. Her eyes teared up at the thought. They walked towards a spot behind her chamber where Ola often sat in pain and tears during her days of sorrow. To her surprise, Obie's eyes were not fixed on her but on the spot the snake had passed into her chambers last night. Right before her eyes, he walked to the spot with the snake's trace still on the ground, filling it with dirt to make it impossible for anyone else to notice. Ola turned her face away from him, trying to calm her troubled heart and weak eyes, which were about to pour out tears. She knew if she cried, it would confirm Obie's suspicions. After filling the ground, he looked back at the princess, but she avoided eye contact. Obie could see the guilt on her face. He knew what he just did must have sent different assumptions into her head without him saying a word. "Last night, I was sitting outside my hut when I saw a snake entering your chambers. I was frightened and scared for your life because I thought the snake would harm you. I immediately called out to the guards, but we couldn't find you. I have never been that scared in my life," Obie began, his voice filled with emotion. "The last time my heart felt such pain was when my mother died. And last night brought back that fragile part of me I thought had long died away." Ola didn't know what to say or how to behave. She felt she had hurt him. Apart from her father, Obie was the next closest person to her who also cared for her, and hearing him say those words sent pain to her heart. In all he said, he didn't try to make any physical contact, but his eyes were fully concentrated on her, though she turned away in guilt. "Your mother loves you, Ola," he continued. "I thought about her fears last night and realized just how much she loves you. When she said you were in her chambers sleeping, I almost believed her. But then I remembered your encounter with her the other evening in the kitchen. She could barely stand your presence there. How then could she let you sleep in her chambers?" Ola turned her eyes to Obie with tears glistening, ready to fall. They both looked at each other as he spoke. "But thinking about it all night, I decided to wait by your chambers. And to my surprise I saw you leaving from a chamber I had searched like a madman last night, scared you were in danger. You didn't leave from your mother's chambers, but you left from yours, which only means you were in your chambers all along the search. Obie looked at her with a hint of anger in his voice, filling the princess with fear. In a swift gesture, he nodded, trying to accept the truth himself. You should be careful, he said before walking back to his hut. Ola stayed back at the spot with tears falling from her eyes. She felt she had just lost something very important to her. She had lost Obie's care and friendship. He should have at least said something to me, been straightforward. He should have told me the bitter truth and all the hurtful words instead of leaving me in doubt, she cried bitterly behind her chambers. Obie entered his hut, his heart heavy with various emotions. He had tried to calm himself and act the best he could, but the truth was a bitter pill to swallow. He lay on his bed, remembering the incident from last night. The snake did have gentle eyes as it looked back at him before hurrying into the princess's chamber. Obie decided they were both going to fight it together with him being by her side. It could be a curse. He thought silently. Ola is a very kind and gentle soul. She won't even dare to harm a fly. How then was she experiencing all this? As Obie dug into his thoughts, he remembered he had abandoned her all by herself behind her chambers. I will talk to her and tell her what I have decided before going to call the chief priest. After Ola cried for close to an hour, she resolved to talk to Obie. She knew she had to apologize for deceiving him and lying to him. Despite his sincere feelings towards her, she had hurt him deeply, and now, he was probably scared of her. Determined to fight for their relationship, she walked to Obie's hut. As she approached, she saw him leaving. Their eyes met, and the princess couldn't shake the sense of guilt that crept into her heart. I was coming to meet you, Obie said, looking directly into her eyes. He realized she must have been crying because of his silence earlier. Your eyes are swollen, he said with concern, his voice filled with urgency. He gently touched the swollen area beneath her eyes, his concern visible on his face. He just touched me, Ola thought, her heart brimming with excitement. Despite everything, he still cares about me. I didn't expect you to come here, Obie continued gently. Something as trivial as that shouldn't make you cry. I'm sorry for the way I acted earlier. I hurt you by leaving you out there alone. I had hoped my instincts were wrong, but they weren't, and the thought of you being out there with no one to protect you hurt me deeply. Obie apologized, holding her shoulders as he spoke. Tears began streaming down her cheeks, followed by a heavy sob. Instinctively, Obie embraced her, not caring about their surroundings. You shouldn't cry, Ola. You are a beautiful soul. I was only faced with the difficulty of accepting the reality, but it's you that matters to me the most. He gently tapped her back as she cried her heart out in his arms. After 5 minutes, she was fully calm, and Obie directed her into his chamber. They sat close to each other, his arm wrapped around her shoulders. They sat in silence for nearly 10 minutes before Obie began to speak again. I don't know how you ended up in this situation, but I won't force you to tell me, he said gently. I was on my way to the chief priest to call him over to the palace for a cleansing. That way, it won't raise any suspicions about last night, and you can freely stay in your chambers. I know the queen said you spent the night with her, but we both know what her reaction would be if she saw you in her chambers. The presence of the chief priest around the palace will make the servants forget yesterday's incident. As Obie spoke, he felt the princess's arms tighten around his chest. She was listening intently, and her grip on him showed her gratitude and relief. Obie smiled, feeling her hands clutching him, unwilling to let go. Thank you, the princess whispered in a low voice. She freed her arms from Obie's embrace. My father made me this way. He killed his elder brother, who was supposed to be the next king of this kingdom. And when he was too scared to swear before the villagers to prove his innocence, he sought the protection of Mother Earth. He was declared innocent and crowned the next king. But Mother Earth demanded the spirit of an unborn child, and I was still in my mother's womb. The king was at odds with the queen, who didn't support his evil deeds, so he accepted the bargain and gave my spirit to Mother Earth. When my mother realized what he did, She hated both me and my father. Obie listened silently, pity swelling in his heart. He could hardly believe the extent of Ola's suffering and the loneliness she had endured. If you ask me, I would say the Queen loves you. She just finds it difficult to accept that her own daughter's spirit is controlled by Mother Earth to transform into a snake, Obie finally said, his voice steady. But that snake is not you. You were born a human, and you will remain a human. You won't go behind your hut every evening to cry, and you won't hide in your chambers at night, waiting for a fate that is not yours. I am here now, and together, we will face it all. Ola smiled, looking at him with gratitude. Thank you, she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. That was all she could say. You don't have to thank me. I will go to the chief priest now and invite him over while you rest in your father's chambers. Ola nodded her head in agreement, with Obie leading her out of his hut towards her father's chambers. Later that day, the chief priest arrived at the palace and performed a general cleansing. The ritual was elaborate, involving chants and the burning of sacred herbs. The servants and guards watched with a mixture of curiosity and reverence, their attention diverted from the previous night's incident. The air in the palace felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. Ola, now back in her chambers, felt a profound sense of relief. The chief priest's presence and the cleansing ritual had brought her a sense of security she hadn't felt in a long time. It felt like the happiest day of her life. She was not only free from immediate danger but also felt the warmth of Obie's support and understanding. As the sun set, casting a golden hue over the palace, Ola sat by her window, her heart filled with hope. The road ahead was still uncertain, but she was no longer alone. She had Obie by her side, and together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. In the days that followed after Obie discovered the princess's secret, his presence in and out of her chambers became increasingly noticeable. He visited her often, and she began spending time in his chambers as well. Their bond grew stronger with each passing day, and their companionship became a source of joy and comfort for both. The palace halls echoed with their laughter, a sound that was rare and precious in the otherwise somber environment. Their laughter was infectious, and the maidens and servants would often stop their tasks to watch them play and laugh, completely captivated by their carefree joy and the genuine connection they shared. The king observed his daughter from a distance, his heart swelling with pride and happiness. He prayed silently that she would always keep smiling, hoping that this newfound friendship would bring her lasting happiness. However, the queen watched the unfolding relationship with a mixture of joy and sadness. She was happy to see her daughter smile and laugh, but she was also scared. She feared that Obie might abandon the princess once he learned the truth about her snake form, a secret that had cast a shadow over their family for years. This fear gnawed at her, causing her to worry incessantly about the future. What the queen did not know, however, was that Obie already knew the princess's secret and had made a conscious decision to stand by her. He had accepted her for who she was, a decision that had brought him closer to her and solidified their bond. One evening, the king decided it was time to talk to his daughter about her friendship with Obie. He feared the potential heartbreak that could come if Obie were to discover her secret and abandon her. Throughout the day, the king had intended to speak with her, but he noticed that she was always with Obie, unwilling to let go of his side. He decided he would wait until nightfall when Obie wouldn't be around to see her in her snake form. He wanted to warn her, to plead with her to be cautious. As the night deepened, the king made his way to his daughter's chambers, his mind heavy with worry. He entered quietly, not wanting to startle her. To his surprise, he found her in her snake form, coiled on the floor, deep in conversation with Obie. The sight was shocking. He had never imagined that his personal advisor would not only know about the princess's secret but also accept it to the extent of being with her behind closed doors without any fear. His disbelief was palpable as he stood frozen at the entrance, unable to speak. Ola, still in her snake form, turned to her father, her eyes widening in surprise to see him there. She had not expected him to enter her chambers at such a time. The king's eyes moved between his daughter and Obie, taking in the scene before him. He marveled at the strength of their friendship, at how Obie had accepted his daughter so completely. It was a friendship built on trust and understanding, something he had feared she would never find. Gathering his composure, the king apologized for interrupting. He explained that he had come to warn her to stay away from his personal advisor, fearing that once Obie discovered her secret, he would reject her. But seeing them together, he realized that there was nothing more to say. The bond they shared was unbreakable, and any warnings he had planned seemed unnecessary now. Obie, sensing the king's inner turmoil, smiled reassuringly at him. "Your Highness," he began, his voice calm and steady, "Ola is an innocent, beautiful soul undeserving of the punishment she faces. She is kind, gentle, and has a heart full of love. The form she takes does not change who she is inside. I see her for who she truly is, and I will stand by her no matter what." The king felt a pang of guilt and a rush of emotions as he listened to Obie's words. He realized how much he had underestimated both his daughter and his advisor. With a heavy heart, he nodded, acknowledging the depth of their friendship and the courage it took for Obie to stand by Ola despite knowing her secret. "Thank you, Obie," he said, his voice tinged with emotion. "You have shown more courage and compassion than I could have ever hoped for." As the king walked out of his daughter's chamber, closing the door behind him, he felt a mixture of relief and sadness. He had always feared for his daughter's future, but now he felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps, with Obie by her side, she would be able to find the happiness and acceptance she deserved. Inside the chamber, Obie turned back to Ola, his expression soft and kind. He touched her head gently, without a trace of fear. "You are not alone," he whispered. "I am here with you, always." His words were a balm to her troubled heart, and she felt a surge of gratitude and affection for him. Their bond grew even stronger that night, as they talked and shared their thoughts and fears. Obie's unwavering support gave Ola the strength to face her challenges, and his presence became a source of comfort and reassurance. Meanwhile, the queen constantly noticed Obie leaving the princess's chambers late at night and saw her leaving with him to his chambers in the evening. She watched them, her mind swirling with confusion and doubt, wondering if her eyes and instincts were deceiving her. The sight of them together so often, so comfortable in each other's presence, was both baffling and intriguing. Unable to quell her curiosity and concern, she decided to seek answers. One evening, after another long day of watching the growing closeness between her daughter and Obie, the queen approached the king's chambers. She found him seated at his desk, engrossed in a scroll. Clearing her throat softly, she stepped inside. "Your Highness," she began hesitantly, "may I have a word with you?" The king looked up, surprised by the urgency in her voice. "Of course," he replied, setting the scroll aside. "What troubles you?" Taking a deep breath, the queen sat down across from him. "I have noticed something that has been puzzling me greatly," she said, her voice tinged with a mix of worry and confusion. "I have seen Obie leaving our daughter's chambers late at night and the two of them spending time together in his chambers in the evening. What is happening?" The king listened carefully, his expression serious. "I understand your concern," he began slowly. "What you have observed is indeed true. Obie has been spending a lot of time with Ola." "But why?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. "Does he know? Does he know about her?" "Yes," the king interrupted gently. "Obie knows the truth about Ola. He discovered her secret some time ago and has come to accept it. He has chosen to stand by her without bearing any grudges." The queen was stunned into silence. For a moment, she struggled to find the right words. I cannot believe it," she finally managed to say. "Someone outside our family has accepted her for who she is, while I, her own mother, could not. I ran to him for protection from my own daughter, and yet he has embraced her without fear." Seeing the sadness and guilt in her eyes, the king reached out and took her hand. "My dear," he said softly, "no amount of apologies can undo the past or erase the pain we have caused. But please do not judge yourself too harshly. You are not a bad person." Tears welled up in the queen's eyes as she shook her head. But I am, she insisted. I have been a terrible mother. I neglected Ola from the moment she was born. I allowed my fear to dictate my actions, and I pushed her away when she needed me the most. The king squeezed her hand reassuringly. Ola is not angry with you, he said gently. Even if she harbors some resentment, which I doubt, Obie is there for her. He is a kind and compassionate man. He will not let her harbor such thoughts in her heart. He will help her heal. The queen wiped her tears and took a deep breath, trying to absorb her husband's words. The realization that someone had seen past her daughter's curse and embraced her with love and acceptance filled her heart with a strange mixture of joy and sadness. Joy for her daughter's newfound friendship and the unwavering support of Obie, but sadness for her own failure to be the mother Ola needed. Later that night, the queen sat in her chambers, reflecting on the conversation with the king. She thought about how Obie's acceptance of Ola had changed the atmosphere in the palace. There was more laughter, more light, and a sense of hope that had been absent for so long. The sight of them together, sharing moments of joy and understanding, was a testament to the power of unconditional love and acceptance. As the days passed, the queen began to see more clearly the depth of Obie and Ola's bond. She noticed how their laughter rang through the halls, a melody that brought smiles to the faces of everyone who heard it. The servants and maidens would pause in their duties, captivated by the pure and unrestrained joy that the two shared. It was as if their happiness was a beacon, cutting through the gloom that had long overshadowed the palace. The queen felt a profound sadness in her heart, a sorrow that seemed to grow with each passing day. Despite this, she couldn't bring herself to approach her daughter, still gripped by the fear that Ola harm her. As she passed by the princess, she noticed a stark change. Ola no longer seemed to care about her mother's love and affection. Unlike in the past, when she would always initiate a conversation despite the rejection, she now showed little interest in her mother. This indifference was a knife in the queen's heart, and she realized how much her daughter had distanced herself emotionally. One evening, Obie sat with Ola behind her hut, discussing a story he remembered from his childhood. He spoke of a great man who could break spells, a man who lived in the mountains of their village. Obie's grandmother had often told him tales of this man when he was young. As he recounted the story, he could see the reluctance in Ola's eyes. However, seeing the determination in his face, she finally agreed to consider it. I will seek the king's permission and go there first to verify the story before we make any decisions about the mountain, Obie assured her, his voice steady and reassuring. But Ola immediately clutched his arm tightly. No, Obie. The mountain is dangerous. You can't go there all by yourself, she implored with her eyes wide with concern. Nothing will happen to me. Together, we will find a solution to this problem. Trust me. Later that evening, Obie approached the king in his chambers. Your Majesty, I have a request, he began, bowing respectfully. I've heard of a man who might be able to break the spell that afflicts the princess. He lives in the mountains near our village. I wish to seek him out. The king listened carefully, nodding slowly. Before he could respond, Ola, who had followed Obie to the chamber, fell to her knees. Please, father, don't let him go alone. I cannot bear the thought of losing him, she pleaded, tears welling up in her eyes. The king's heart ached at the sight of his daughter's distress. Do not worry, Ola, he said gently. Obie will not go alone. I will send my best guards with him to ensure his safety. Ola managed a small smile, though her heart still felt heavy. She didn't know when Obie would return to her side, and the thought of being without him filled her with dread. Very early the next morning, before the first light of dawn, Obie visited Ola's chambers. He found her still in her snake form, waiting for the sunrise. He approached her quietly, not wanting to disturb the serene moment. Ola, he whispered softly, I promise I will return before you know it. We will find a way to lift this curse. She turned to face him, her eyes filled with a mix of hope and fear. Please be careful. I couldn't bear it if something happened to you. Obie knelt beside her. I will be careful, and I would do anything to see you free from this curse. Have faith in me. You've been my only source of happiness. You've shown me kindness and friendship when I had none. Please, come back to me safely." "I will," Obie promised, his voice filled with emotion. "I will come back, and we will find a way to end this together." As the first rays of sunlight began to break through the darkness, Obie stood up, ready to begin his journey. Ola watched him leave, her heart heavy with both hope and fear. She knew that Obie was brave and resourceful, but the thought of him facing unknown dangers alone was almost unbearable. As Obie made his way towards the palace gates, the guards assigned to accompany him fell in step behind him. The king watched from a distance, his heart filled with a mixture of pride and concern. He had seen the bond between his daughter and Obie grow stronger, and he prayed for Obie's safe return. The queen too watched from her window, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. She had spent so long fearing her daughter's curse that she had forgotten what it meant to hope. But seeing Obie's determination and the love he had for Ola filled her with a newfound sense of optimism. As the days turned into weeks, the palace seemed quieter without Obie's and Ola's laughter echoing through its halls. The queen found herself constantly looking out for any sign of Obie's return, her heart aching with both worry and anticipation. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the queen approached the king once more. "Do you think Obie will succeed?" she asked, her voice tinged with anxiety. "I believe in Obie," he said firmly. "He is determined and courageous. If anyone can find a way to help Ola, it is him." The queen nodded, her heart still heavy but filled with a glimmer of hope. "I never imagined that someone outside our family could show such love and acceptance to our daughter. It shames me to think that I, her own mother, could not do the same." The king took her hand, his eyes filled with understanding. "We all make mistakes, but what matters is that we learn from them and strive to do better. Ola does not hold any anger towards you. She loves you, even if she cannot always show it. But I was so afraid. I let my fear control me, and in doing so, I pushed her away." The king held her close, his voice soft and reassuring. "We cannot change the past, but we can change how we move forward. Obie has shown us that acceptance and love are the keys to breaking this curse. Let us follow his example and stand by our daughter." As the days continued to pass, the queen found herself growing more anxious. She spent more time in prayer, hoping for Obie's safe return and for a miracle that would free her daughter from the curse. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, a messenger arrived at the palace gates with news. Obie had found the great spellcaster and was returning with him to the palace. The queen's heart leapt with joy and relief. She didn't know when she rushed to Ola's chambers to share the news. "Ola," she said breathlessly as she entered, "Obie is coming back. He found the spellcaster, and they are on their way here." Ola's eyes lit up with hope. "Really? He's coming back?" she asked, her voice filled with a mix of excitement and disbelief. "Yes, my dear," the queen replied, tears of joy streaming down her face. "He is coming back, and with him, the hope of breaking this curse." As the sun set that evening, the entire palace was filled with anticipation. The king and queen stood at the gates, waiting for Obie and the spellcaster to arrive. When they finally appeared on the horizon, the queen's heart swelled with gratitude. Obie approached, his face weary but filled with determination. Beside him walked an elderly man, his eyes wise and kind. "Your Majesties," Obie said, bowing respectfully, "this is the great spellcaster who can help our princess." The old man stepped forward, his voice gentle but firm. "I will do all I can to help your daughter," he said. "With love and acceptance, we can break this curse." As they led the spellcaster to Ola's chambers, the queen's heart was filled with hope. She knew that, no matter what happened, the love and acceptance that had grown within the palace walls would be the true key to breaking the curse and healing their family. The great spellcaster followed the king and queen to Ola's chambers, with Ola trailing behind them, and Obie standing excitedly nearby. The air was thick with anticipation as they approached the chambers from the back door. The old man carried the ground from which the snake walked every night, hoping it would aid in breaking the curse. Inside the chambers, the spellcaster began his work. He spread the earth on the floor, chanting incantations, his hands moving in intricate patterns. However, despite his efforts, nothing happened. The atmosphere grew tense, and frustration was visible on his face. He turned to the king and requested him to narrate the entire incident that led to the current situation. The king, with a heavy heart, began to recount the tale. As he spoke, tears welled up in his daughter's eyes, scared that their last hope might fail. Sensing her fear, Obie embraced her tightly, offering silent reassurance. "Ola," he whispered, "we will find a way. I promise." For the first time, Ola's mother approached her daughter, tears streaming down her face. She understood her daughter's fears and, in an unprecedented show of affection, embraced her. This shocked Ola to her core. "Mother," Ola whispered, astonished. You've never." "I know, my dear," the queen said, her voice trembling. "I know I haven't shown it, but I love you deeply. We will get through this together." Overwhelmed, Ola sobbed in her mother's arms, unwilling to let go. The queen assured her daughter, promising to stand by her from now on, disregarding everything else. The spellcaster, observing the scene, addressed the royal family. "The spell was formed out of hatred and greed in the king's heart," he explained. "Your actions, driven by neglect and forgetting the love in your heart, were used to cast this curse," he said, referring to the king who had guilt plastered all over his face. "And the only way to break it is through sacrificial love." "What do you mean by sacrificial love?" the king asked, his voice trembling. "The princess will never have the heart to love again," he replied. "She will not respond to companionship but will need someone by her side who will love her despite her inability to reciprocate. This person must not be a family member." Tears flowed from Ola's eyes upon hearing this. The thought of sacrificing her ability to find love was heartbreaking. "Is there no other way?" Ola pleaded, falling to her knees before the spellcaster. "Please, there must be another solution." The spellcaster shook his head. "I am sorry, princess, but this is the only way to break the curse." The room fell silent, rooted in shock at his words. As the spellcaster continued, Obie interrupted him. "I will sacrifice myself," he declared, his voice filled with determination. "I will love the princess as a partner and will never compromise her feelings." His words shocked everyone, including the king and queen. If you enjoy the story and will love to see more, please consider subscribing and leaving a comment. Your support will help us create part 3 and future stories. Please stay tuned to more of our interesting African tales. See you in part 3 to find out about Obie's confrontation with Mother Earth.